Okay, so you want to buy a tank. Find one at auction, ship it out to a patch of land, fire it up on a Saturday morning, and charge people just to ride along while it crushes a car. You would be the most interesting person in your county, and here is the strange part. This is real. Civilians genuinely own tanks. There is an entire quiet market for them: auctions, brokers, restorers, waiting lists. That is the dream, and it is not entirely wrong. The problem is what happens between the dream and the reality. What a running tank actually costs to buy. What it costs every single time the engine turns over. Why the purchase price turns out to be the cheapest part. And why the man who built the greatest tank collection on Earth left behind a lesson that nobody who buys one ever forgets. Start with the question almost nobody can answer. Who actually sells tanks? Because there is no tank dealership. There is no showroom. What there is instead is a strange, three-layered market, and the layer you buy from decides everything about the next 10 years of your life. The bottom layer is government surplus. Militaries retire vehicles by the thousand, and in America, a lot of them end up on an auction site called GovPlanet, where an ordinary person with an ordinary credit card can bid on an actual military Humvee for somewhere between $5,000 and $25,000. That is the cheapest legal way into military steel, and thousands of people have done it. But read the fine print, and you find the first catch of this entire industry. Most of those vehicles are sold for off-road use only, with paperwork that makes getting a normal road title somewhere between painful and impossible. You own it. You just can't necessarily drive it to the grocery store. The middle layer is the dealer market. In Britain, which has some of the loosest rules on owning armor anywhere in the West, there are actual tank dealers, businesses with fields full of Chieftains, Soviet T-55s, and armored personnel carriers, selling to farmers, collectors, and film companies. Entry price for a real, tracked, turret-wearing tank from this layer runs somewhere in the range of $30,000 to $80,000. About the price of a nice pickup truck, for a machine built to survive a war. And then there's the top layer, the blue chip layer, running Second World War armor. A genuine driving M4 Sherman, the tank that liberated Europe, trades somewhere between $300,000 and $600,000, depending on variant and condition. And the rarest German machines go far beyond that, into the millions, when they come up for sale at all. Which brings us to the single most important word in this entire market: condition. Because the gap between a running tank and a project tank is not a discount. It is a different asset entirely. And most first-time buyers find that out the expensive way. Here is the first thing nobody tells you. When you buy a tank, the tank is not the only thing you take home. You inherit everything that comes attached to it: the paperwork, the history, and the problems. Start with the gun. In the United States, the law draws one very clear line. If the main gun has been properly deactivated, the government essentially treats your tank like a very heavy piece of farm equipment. You can own it, drive it on your land, take it to shows. But if that gun still fires, the whole machine changes category. A working main gun is legally a destructive device, which means federal registration, a $200 tax stamp, and a background process, and every single explosive shell you ever buy for it is registered as its own separate destructive device. Owning a live tank legally is completely possible. People do it. But it means you have inherited a permanent relationship with federal paperwork. Then you inherit the supply chain, or rather the absence of one. Nobody manufactures parts for a 1944 Sherman. Every road wheel, every track link, every gasket either comes from a shrinking pile of old stock, gets machined from scratch, or gets pulled off another dead tank. The engine in many Shermans is a 9-cylinder radial, an airplane engine, dropped into a hull. When that cracks, you are not calling a mechanic. You are calling one of maybe a few dozen specialists on the planet. You also inherit a transport problem. A tank weighs 30 tons and up. It cannot be towed. It moves on a heavy-haul lowboy trailer, with permits, at a cost of thousands of dollars per trip. Every show, every film job, every sale, the tank travels like an industrial machine, because it is one, and occasionally, you inherit a genuine surprise. In 2017, a British tank dealer named Nick Mead bought an old ex-Iraqi tank, opened up the fuel tank during restoration, and found gold bars inside a reported £2 million worth, likely looted decades earlier and hidden in the one place nobody looks. He called the police. The story made the BBC. It is the only case on record of a tank paying for itself on day one. Every other tank ever sold went the other direction. And that direction is exactly where we're headed next. Because here is where it gets genuinely interesting. A tank sitting in a barn is a hole that eats money. But a tank that works, a tank with a business wrapped around it, has more ways of earning than almost any collector vehicle on Earth. There are 4 of them. The first layer is the experience business. There's a ranch in Uvalde, Texas, called Ox Ranch, home to an operation called Drive Tanks, the only place in the world where a member of the public can walk in, drive real armor, and fire live main guns, all legally, all above board. People pay hundreds of dollars just to drive a tank for part of an hour. They pay more to crush a car with it, and firing a single live round from a Second World War main gun costs thousands of dollars for one trigger pull. Think about that unit economics for a second. One customer, one afternoon, can hand you more revenue than that tank's fuel bill for the year. In Britain, tank driving day businesses run the same playbook at slightly gentler prices, driving sessions in the hundreds of pounds, car-crushing packages well over 1,000. The second layer is film and television. Production companies need real armor because audiences can smell fake tanks. When the movie Fury needed a tiger, it borrowed the only running one on Earth from a museum in England, the first time a real tiger had appeared in a feature film since the 1940s. Private owners with running, camera-ready vehicles rent them out with an operator, and rare armor can command day rates in the low thousands. A tank that photographs well is a piece of industrial equipment with a talent agent. The third layer is appearances. Air shows, memorial events, reenactments, museum loans. Individually small checks, hundreds to low thousands per event, but they stack across a season, and they keep the machine exercised, which old machinery genuinely needs. And the fourth layer is the quiet one, appreciation. Blue-chip Second World War armor has climbed for decades because they are not making any more of it, and museums, foundations, and wealthy collectors keep bidding for the same shrinking pool. The tank earns while it sits on paper. So far, this sounds like a machine that pays you 4 different ways at once. Hold that thought, because now we need to talk about what one of these machines actually costs to keep alive. Start with fuel, because fuel is the honest number that tells you everything. A Sherman does not get miles per gallon. A Sherman gets gallons per mile, somewhere between 1 and 2 of them, depending on the ground. Listen to that number again. Gallons per mile. Its entire fuel tank, roughly the capacity of 3 family cars put together, is good for about 100, maybe 150 miles. Every single mile you drive costs more than most people's daily commute. And fuel is the cheap part of the day. Now flip the ledger over, because the expense side of a tank has layers too, and they are less fun than the revenue ones. The rule of thumb in the armor world is that tracked vehicles demand maintenance hours for every hour they run. Not minutes, hours. After a day of driving, something always needs attention. A track adjuster, a leaking seal, a battery bank, a road wheel bearing, and when a big component goes, the bill arrives in tank scale. A set of tracks is not a set of tires. Replacing worn track and running gear on heavy armor costs thousands upon thousands of dollars, when the parts can be found at all. An engine rebuild on a rare wartime power plant can quietly pass the price of a new luxury car if you can find one of the few shops on Earth willing to touch it. Then comes storage. 30 tons of 1940s steel cannot live outside. Rain gets into everything, seals dry out, and steel tracks chew up any paved surface they touch. So you need covered, dry, industrial-grade space, which means you are either wealthy in land or paying commercial storage rates on something the size of a small bus. Then insurance. Not for the tank, for everyone near it. The moment your tank drives at an event, crushes a car for a paying customer, or rolls onto a film set, You are in specialty liability territory, and specialty liability on a 30-ton vehicle with zero visibility and no crumple zone is priced accordingly. The experienced businesses that make tank ownership profitable are exactly the activities that make tank ownership expensive to insure. Revenue and risk arrive in the same envelope, and underneath all of it sits the labor. The successful owners either are mechanics, employ mechanics, or have built a circle of obsessive volunteer machinists around the vehicle. That is not a luxury. It is a structural requirement of the asset, which leads us straight into the trap, the one almost every first-time buyer walks into with their eyes open and their wallet out. The trap is the project tank. It looks like the smart move. A running Sherman costs $500,000. A non-running one, a hull, a restoration opportunity, might cost a tenth of that. The math seems obvious. Buy the cheap one, fix it up, capture the difference. Here is what the market knows that the first-time buyer does not. The purchase price of a project tank is not a discount. It is an entry fee to an open-ended obligation. Parts that do not exist. Specialist labor measured in years. Transport bills before the machine earns a cent. The restoration does not cost the difference between the project price and the running price. It routinely costs more than the running tank would have and takes a decade to do it. In this market, the running vehicle is almost always the bargain, and the cheap one is almost always the trap. The people who learned that lesson best learned it from one man in California, and his story is the story of this entire market. His name was Jacques Littlefield, Stanford-trained engineer, heir to a construction and mining fortune, and the owner of what became the largest private armor collection on the planet, more than 220 vehicles, parked in purpose-built halls on his family's ranch in Portola Valley, California, just over the hill from Silicon Valley. Littlefield did not just buy tanks. He industrialized the hobby. He ran a foundation, employed full-time restorers, and drew a rotating crew of volunteer machinists who treated his workshop like a cathedral. His masterpiece tells you everything about what restoration really means at the top of this market. His Panther, one of the most feared German tanks of the war, was not bought at an auction. It was pulled out of a riverbed in Poland, where it had sat drowned for half a century. Getting that wreck back to running condition took his team roughly 10 years and a reported $1 million for one vehicle that he essentially got for free. Littlefield's operation quietly set the standards, the values, and the benchmark prices for the entire collector armor world. When people today say a restored German tank is worth millions, they are quoting a market he effectively created in his own garage. And then, in 2009, at 59 years old, Jacques Littlefield died, and the market he built got its most important lesson from his estate. Because here is the thing about 220 tanks. They do not stop costing money when their owner is gone. The buildings, the maintenance, the security, the sheer physical mass of the collection, the foundation carrying it face the same ledger we have been walking through, multiplied by 200. No family, and almost no institution, can carry that forever. So the collection did the only thing a collection that size can do. It broke apart. The finest vehicles, around 80 of them, were donated to the Collings Foundation, which would later build an entire museum in Massachusetts around them. And in July of 2014, auctioneers spent 2 days on the ranch selling off roughly 120 of the rest, in the single greatest private armor sale ever held. The headline lot was Littlefield's restored Panzer IV, one of the finest in existence. It hammered for around $2.5 million. Sale by sale, that auction did something the market had never had before. It printed public, verified prices for machines that had only ever traded in whispers. Every collector alive today prices their armor off that weekend. But notice what the auction really was. It was the greatest collection on Earth admitting that it could not afford to exist. The vehicles survived. The collection did not. In this market, even winning ends with a dispersal sale. So who actually makes tank ownership work? Look around the market today and the survivors all rhyme. They stopped treating the tank as a possession and started treating it as a working asset with a job. The Texas model turns the tank into an experience machine. Every drive, every crushed car, every fired round is a ticket sold, and the revenue services the maintenance instead of the owner's savings doing it. The film model keeps a small stable of camera-ready vehicles earning day rates, where one production contract can cover a year of upkeep. The museum model, the one Littlefield's best vehicles, ended up enhands the asset to an institution with donors, gift shops, and volunteers, because a nonprofit can carry costs a family cannot. And the collector model, the pure appreciation play, only works at the very top. The blue chip, running, historically documented machines that keep climbing precisely because everyone else's project tanks never made it back to running condition. Notice what is missing from that list. The guy who just wanted a tank. He is the one who pays for everyone else's bargains. Which brings us to the only question that actually matters. So, does owning a tank actually work as a business? The honest answer is the same one this market has always given. It depends entirely on which tank, and on whether the tank has a job. Here is the good year. You own a running, titled, well-documented Sherman. It spends the summer doing paid appearances. A film production books it for 2 weeks with you as the operator. Your driving experience weekends sell out, and at the end of the year, the market values it higher than it did in January. The machine covered its own costs, paid you, and appreciated. That year genuinely happens to a small number of prepared owners. Now, here is the other year. You bought the project. The engine that was almost running needs a rebuild nobody in your hemisphere can do. The track you were promised was fine, is not fine. It costs 4 figures just to move it anywhere, so it moves nowhere, and it earns nothing, while storage, insurance, and interest tick every single month on a machine that cannot leave its shed. That year also genuinely happens constantly, and it is why the classifieds are full of half-finished hulls being sold by tired men for less than they have spent. Same asset class, same dream. The difference was never the tank. It was whether the buyer understood what they were really signing up for. Because here is the truth hiding under this entire market. The one Jacques Littlefield's workshop understood better than anyone. A tank was never designed to be owned. It was designed to be supplied by an army, with depots, mechanics, fuel trucks, and spare parts stretching back to a factory. Buy one, and none of that disappears. It just becomes your job. You are not buying the machine. You are volunteering to become its army.